Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod with our final installment of the Big Ten previews, not the Spartans, of course, with the Purdue Boilermakers coming in at number one. Unlike the other Indiana school, Rod is picking Purdue to actually thinks to win the Big Ten, not just picking them as first, but not expecting them to win. So don't worry, our deep season preview for the Spartans is right around the corner, as is the season opener, which is why I'd like to remind you to check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/at TFFINOTS. Subscribe so you can be notified. We will be there after games, so you can join us live for broadcasts and post-game analysis for every Spartan game. All right, Rod, let's talk about the Boilermakers, who had a good season, very solid season, but certainly not by their recent standards, where they won the Big Ten by three games the previous 2 years. So they finished 24-12 overall, 13-7 in the Big Ten. And with all the tiebreakers, they ended up being like, I don't know, the fourth or fifth seed. I can't remember exactly. They finished the season with a 4-game losing streak in mid-February, which some of those were close games, but it kind of hurt them. It definitely felt like Braden Smith, as great as he was playing so many minutes, and they were so dependent. They were playing so heavy with him that it kind of caught up to them at the end of the season a little bit. Also, the big thing for them last year is they lost their 7-footer, which of course has been a staple of Purdue programs in the past, and so they were playing just, we'll say, weird Purdue Boilermaker basketball. And so credit to the Painters for sort of just managing to keep that team together, although they had obviously a lot of really good parts. They were elite offensively, despite not having their standard 7-footer. They were number 7 overall. They had outstanding 3-point and 2-point shooting, but the defense was not good. They were 53rd, and they were really bad against twos, 332nd, which was partly because they didn't have the usual 7-footer inside. So they had to play things a little bit differently. And so, this coming this year, obviously they got their injured 7-footer or 7-foot 4-footer who's back. So they expect to be better, and then bring back all the other key components who made them so good last year.
Yeah, it's a weird year, and you've got a Purdue person in your life.
I
I
do. My
don't.
son is at Purdue.
I
Yes.
don't. So I don't know how the fan base feels about it, but it struck me as a weird year in the sense that the regular season was down a bit, not a disaster, but down a bit from when you're used to winning conference titles, a year where you don't is a down year.
Yeah. Right.
Michigan State fans know that feeling. And and so that was definitely true, but on the other hand, they got to the second weekend and barring a miracle play at the end could have beaten Houston
Right.
to get to an Elite 8. That's something that Purdue fans are not used to. Now I know they were coming off a national title game appearance, but this has been the narrative around Purdue for forever. I mean, this is going back to Gene Cady.
Yeah.
Is great
Glenn
regular
Robinson. Yeah.
season program, rarely do any real damage in the tournament. That is the Purdue narrative. So to have kind of a relative down year in the regular season and yet get to the second weekend and honestly have had a legitimate chance they were right there to get to an Elite Eight at least. Uh, that was, I just wonder what the final feeling was that settled in with Purdue fans. I'm not sure because ultimately, college basketball, and we can lament this if we choose to, but college basketball has largely become about what you do over 3 weeks in March.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's really it. And Purdue it's been a regular feature of that program to have a great 4 months and then a very disappointing week, let's say, in
Right.
the tournament, because usually that's about how long they last.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of flipped last year. And so I don't know, did people feel better about that? They obviously didn't feel better about it than the year before, but I'm talking in a general sense over the last decade or so when since Matt Painter's really got it going at Purdue. Um, did that feel better in the end because you had that run in the tournament as opposed to those years like 2 years prior where they ran roughshod over the Big Ten, were one seed, everybody loved them, and then fell flat on their face in March?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting question though to ponder, and I don't know where Purdue fans check in on it, but um, Look, I think that as you pointed out, the issues were pretty obvious. This is a great offensive team. They usually are under Matt Painter. He's always got a mix, seemingly, of legit post presence. Last year it was Trey Kaufman Renn, and good shooting surrounding that.
Yeah.
If you have that and you don't make a lot of mistakes, which they don't typically, turning the ball over, you're going to be a good offensive team. And they
Right.
were. I mean, it's that simple. But the defense, remember, this is, and it's funny because I think of Matt Painter and Purdue's program as one that's solid defensively. And for the most part, they have been. But there have been these outlier years. One of them was 3 years ago where they had Jaden Ivey and that group
Right.
that was very highly regarded. I thought they were the best team in the Big Ten, maybe in the country. They were good, but they didn't quite play up to that level, and they had an early out in the tournament. Why did that happen? They couldn't guard anyone. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, they were terrible defensively. I wouldn't say Purdue was terrible last year, but they weren't great or even really very good by Big Ten standards. To be number 53, I mean, they were number 332 in the country against twos. That is horrible, horrible. And it's the most reliable number there is to determining how good a defense is or isn't, is how well you defend against twos, right? Because
Sure.
most shots get taken from there. I
Hmm.
think a large part of it was that they had zero rim protection. You talked about the impact of injury. Um, that was a major factor, but it went even beyond that. That was the biggest, maybe the biggest element of it. But there were other, they just didn't guard well. It's remarkable they won as much as they did with 2 point defense being that bad. I
Yeah.
mean, that is really hard to do. And what it goes to show you is how good they were in all the other areas to
Right.
overcome that because you'd have to be. Um, I think you look into this coming season and expectations are high, to say the least. This is a team you're generally seeing, well, you're seeing consistently in the top five in the preseason. And I think that uh, largely it's most people seem to focus on either Purdue or Houston as the best bet in the preseason to win the title. And justifiably so. Matt Painter has his all his key core guys back,
Right.
and now he's surrounded them with a very good group of newcomers. Some good portal additions, which is not something they've done a lot of, but they've done it this year, not to a crazy extent, but they had some guys leave, so they had vacancies. They had places people to replace, and I think they've done a very good job. And then they've also done a good job, it seems, in conventional recruiting. And so it all adds up to a team that looks to be about as talented as any in the country, and certainly the most talented team with the most proven production coming back in the Big Ten. So they're an obvious choice for number one. I never seriously considered anybody else. I
Yeah.
don't think most people will. Whether they're able to deliver on that's another question because funny things happen. But um, this looks to be a team that has all the elements necessary to contend for everything there is to play for.
Yeah, and certainly Purdue. You look at a team; they've got a fantastic home court advantage. They've got
Yeah.
a coach who is the second longest tenure in the Big Ten, and for good reason. He's definitely shown that he's able to be successful consistently, not only in the regular season, but now you could even say the postseason. He's gotten sort of that monkey off his back, or sort of, and so
Yeah.
there's every reason to think that Purdue will be able to be successful. What's great about Purdue is that they play differently. They still feel Big Ten, but they don't. They have their own style, which is interesting. One maybe that I think when Zach Edey was there, it was not the most fun to watch, but was worked and
No,
it was successful.
terrible. Aesthetic atrocity. But effective. And
Yeah,
I'll definitely give. I mean, you got to give Matt Painter a lot of credit on a lot of levels, but one for sure. Matt Painter has almost single-handedly forced the Big Ten into dealing with what he does.
Yep.
And by that, I mean the constant stream of not just good big men, but huge men has forced a lot of Big Ten programs into changing the way that they assemble their rosters. Because if you want to contend for a championship in the Big Ten, you know that Purdue's going to be a factor, and you know that that position, again, last year was the outlier because of injury. So that might have had something to do with why they didn't finish first or second and were 4 games off the pace,
Yeah.
you know? But generally speaking, you need to have a counter for what Purdue does. That's an incredible accomplishment. I mean, it's same thing. I give Tom Izzo credit for that in that he forced, by virtue of how good Michigan State's break was, I think he forced a lot of Big Ten programs to realize, at least when we're playing Michigan State, we've got to just forget about offensive rebounding. We've got to prioritize floor balance because if we don't get back, they're going to kill us. Well, with Purdue, it's we've got to have an answer, whether
Yeah.
that's doubling, whether in a lot of cases it's been fight fire with fire, and you see teams adding size, adding
Yeah.
real size, not 6'9" centers. There was a long time in this league, if you go back, where you think about Michigan State very rarely in the Izzo era was playing 7-footers. I mean, you
Right.
think
Hmm.
about the great centers that have run through the program. It's Antonio Smith, it's Andre Hudson, it's Zach Randolph, um, Xavier Tillman. That's a lot of guys in that 6'8", 6'9" range. You don't see that as much anymore. And I think part of the reason why the big man is not dead in the Big Ten the way it is in some other leagues is because of Purdue. That's a hell of an
Yeah.
accomplishment.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's before we go any further, let's just remind you that the season recap was brought to you by Nudge Printing, the longest sponsor of our show, and it's because they have the best apparel. If you need Spartan apparel or other school apparel, head on over to nudgeprinting.com. You can get 20% off. You mentioned Final Four. Just type in Final Four at the checkout to get that 20% off as a listener to the show. You will not be disappointed with whatever you get. Get it for gifts. It's getting closer. We're at the point where you're maybe thinking about Christmas. It's a great place to get some Christmas
Wow.
gifts for the Spartan and your family. And just make sure you get some for yourself because we've definitely had people who buy them as gifts and then like them too much and keep them. So make sure you get enough to cover everybody. So head on over to Nudge Printing, and they are the ones who sponsor our Beat Rod contest, which you have to predict the Big Ten standings 1 through 18. Send those entries to me at eric@tffinots.com. Then I will compile those. Make sure you also put in the amount of points you think Michigan State will score against Michigan this season. Those who end up in first, second place will get gift cards to Nudge Printing, so you can get some of that free stuff. And it's a pretty good gift card, a pretty big prize. So make sure you do that today. No cost to that entry. Send them along to me. You have until the first Big Ten game. So unlike Rod, you have the opportunity to watch these teams and see how they fit together. If there are injuries beginning the season, like there was for Purdue last year, you'll know these things in before the deadline, and so you'll at least have one leg up on Rod, which is probably why he doesn't finish as high as everyone else because he doesn't have the opportunity to watch how these teams fit together. So let's talk about the key departures and retention for Purdue. And they had a couple of departures which were, they've not generally had a lot of departures early. They've, much like Michigan State, been a pretty stable program. But they had Cable First, who just departed after 4 years of career. 6'10 post player, had a lot of promise. He shot as a freshman 57, 42, and 72, and then just never came close to that again. Shot 27% from there on out through his career. Had some injuries. He played 18 minutes a game last year, started 23 times, averaged 4.1 points a game, 3.5 rebounds a game, shot 55% of the floor, 65% of the line, didn't even take threes last year. So totally changed the way he was playing. And kind of weird sort of how it'll turn out for him, and I feel kind of bad for them, but I don't know, just the way it worked out, I guess.
Well, he's got a Purdue degree, and
That's worth something.
he obviously he obviously loved being part of the program because I thought he would have transferred out.
Right.
He didn't, and it ended up again in part because of the injury. he ended up playing a bigger role, 18 minutes a game, than I think would have been anticipated before the season. And he was reasonably effective. I mean, he never did great things, but um, he was a solid player on a solid team, you know. And I just think it was surprising because he was a pretty highly regarded recruit. Michigan State wanted him badly,
Yeah.
and at one point, I think thought they had him. He's out of Fort Wayne, and they've had a lot of recruitments. That's also Caleb Swanigan. They've had a lot of weird recruitments with Fort Wayne kids. But Caleb first, when he was a freshman, I thought he was going to be a better shooting version of Matt Costello. That's what I saw. Like a guy who didn't necessarily look like a great athlete, but was actually pretty mobile for a big man,
Hmm.
played with toughness, and had a skill set. That was Matt Costello. Um, but I thought first had the added bonus of being a guy who could legitimately shoot threes. So I was very bullish on him. And he just never got back to that level he was as a freshman. And it wasn't like he saw, at least I'm not aware of any serious injuries. It wasn't that. It just didn't happen for him. And then he eventually got passed by other players. You know, Zach Edey emerged as a star. Um, Trey Kaufman Renn. There were
Right.
other guys that got into that mix ahead of him, and he just never quite regained that footing. So, solid career. He was obviously part of some great teams, nothing to be ashamed of at all, but maybe a little bit disappointing relative to the expectations that were there for him.
Yeah. Certainly have to be so successful that freshman year to have that sort of go sideways on you or
Yeah,
backwards is,
it's weird. It's
yeah.
weird. I don't quite know why, but
Well, the next player we'll talk about is Cam Heide. He's a 6'6" junior. He averaged 4.7 points a game, 3.6 rebounds a game, played about 19 minutes. Started quite a few games. He finished shooting 49, 39, 81. Seemed like a guy who's just able to kind of get make the plays at certain times. And I thought a really solid player, but he's ended up going to Texas.
yeah, and honestly, I don't know what happened with either of these next two guys because they seemed like very much in the Matt Painter Purdue mold,
Right.
except that both of them were really good athletes, which they don't always have on the wing. And by athlete, I'm talking about run jump
Yeah.
primarily. Heidi was a very good athlete and yet also skilled. I mean, 39% from three, and he shot the ball well the year before. He seemed to me like a guy capable of becoming a key player in time. Like I could have seen him as a senior, maybe being, definitely being a starter and maybe a guy that, really becomes a primary option for them. He had that kind of potential. So I'm not sure what happened. I think consistency was an issue in terms of him being able to impose himself on the game. And obviously, the defensive end, he was part of, not the only guy, but part of the problem. But
Yeah.
again, I
Right.
looked at him and I thought athletically, it's kind of the way I felt. Not that they're nearly the same level of player, but it was the way I felt about Jaden Ivey when he was at Purdue. It's like this guy has all the athletic tools, all the physical tools you could ask for. How is he not better defensively? And it was kind of that way with Heidi. But in any event, he hit the portal and ended up at Texas. So, another serious program, which speaks to what I'm talking about, that there's clearly potential for Cam Heidi to be a really good player.
Yeah.
He just needs to find a little bit more consistency in terms of not his efficiency, but his ability to impact games. Like how much he's actually active and doing things when he's on the floor.
Yeah. You wonder if part of it, in part, it was because of diminished role he saw himself playing in this year as well. Like, I
Maybe
think, you're going to, are you just playing for 2 years from now or are you going to play for this year? And so, I mean,
I
that could have
I
been part of it.
suspect that Purdue has some other younger guards who they went to a lot, and maybe he and Colvin, the guy we'll talk about next, kind of felt like they were getting squeezed. It
Yeah.
wasn't that Purdue was going hog wild in the portal.
No, right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's so you mentioned Miles Colvin. He's the other key departure. 6'5" wing, averaged 5.4 points a game, 2.6 rebounds a game. Started a couple games, averaged almost 20 minutes a game. Shot 37, 31, 67, which I think was down a little bit from his freshman year.
It was.
And if, for those who recall, I think the slam dunk competition for high school player, it was came down to him and Cohen Carr, I
That's
think,
right.
going up against it. So
That's right.
super athletic guy, and a guy that just did not fit the usual profile at Purdue, as you mentioned, with the
Yep.
super athletic guys. So he's leaving as well. He's heading to Wake Forest.
And his dad played football at Purdue, so he was a legacy athlete,
Hmm.
we'll say, not the same sport, but a legacy athlete at Purdue. So it's always surprising to see guys. I mean, it's just you think about that, like at Michigan State, you just imagine like if Jace Richardson had transferred. It would
Right.
it would have just seemed really strange. Uh, he's at Wake Forest, and I'm not going to be surprised if he becomes a very, very good player and has a nice couple years at Wake because he's another guy with immense talent. It just, as you noted, his efficiency, his shooting declined a little bit, actually a lot from his freshman year, but he shot well as a freshman. And I think that it's not unrealistic in his case to think, well, he could bounce back
Yeah.
and be really good, be a 40% plus guy even over his last 2 years. And then you put that together with the athletic profile, which is very impressive. Again, I just it's weird to me they lost these guys, but not that they're hurting for talent, but Heidi and Colvin were guys that I expected were going to be 4 year guys and really good players at Purdue. So it's just surprising to me that they aren't going to be that.
Yep. And make sure you have your windows taken care of this season. Make sure that your house is clean and get that done now before the snow starts to fly. Head on over to the Squeegee Squad at Grand Rapids, even the greater Grand Rapids area, whether it's your home, your business, high rise, apartment building, state capitol, whatever it is you're in charge of. Make sure the Squeegee Squad is the first people you call. 15% off as a listener to the show. Just mention Final Four when you get your estimate from Troy. You can find the link to do that at our support page at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. There they can take care of things, whether it's the inside, the outside, the windows. And I imagine this winter too, they'll probably be doing interior painting too if you need that taken care of. They'll get on those ladders so you don't have to, and you can stay safe and stay out of the hospital, the emergency room. All right, so let's talk about key retained players. Probably the biggest one, and it's funny. Braden Smith, obviously 6'1" senior guard. He will not obviously have Zach Edey with him anymore again for another season, but he still did well without him last year. He had 15.8 points a game, 8.7 assists to go with 4.5 rebounds, which was always very impressive that he would get so many boards. He shot 43, 38, and 83. He's going to pass Mateen Cleaves probably in assists for most assists Cassius Winston for most assists in Big Ten history. The thing with Braden Smith that I think people don't appreciate, because I think we're just Michigan State fans, is he had a massive value and he could have gone for millions and millions of dollars to other programs, and he's decided to stay at Purdue. I mean, to his credit, to Matt Painter's credit, and at least I think that I think there are definitely some times you can chase money, and he probably could have made some money, but there is some value to sticking around in a program that may pay off dividends later on. And I think that's there's some calculation there too. He obviously liked it at Purdue in some level too. So anyway, he ends up sticking around at Purdue, which was the big retention for Purdue, obviously, for the season. And he's why Purdue's projected to be so good this year.
Well, he's a big part of it, at least. Uh, yeah, the rumors were I heard rumors about both Kentucky and Michigan, each offering somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million
Yeah, it's crazy.
for him to go. And you're right. It speaks well of him. It speaks well of the program that Matt Painter has built, all of that. That because he's not getting 4 million at Purdue.
You're not getting
I
four
can
million
tell you
in the
that.
NBA, right?
Right. But he's going to go down. I mean, I think this is already a done deal, but with what we anticipate the kind of season he's going to have, he's going to go down as one of the great players in Purdue history. I mean, you're going to,
Yep.
you're talking about, um, uh, obviously Zach Edey, uh, Big Dog Robinson,
Robbie Hummel, Matt
uh,
Painter.
well, Robbie Hummel probably gets in there, and obviously, but for injuries, um, Rick Mount, if you go all the way back to the '60s, Joe Barry Carroll in the '70s, there's a handful. This is a great program with just tremendous tradition, and there are a lot of guys you could cite, but honestly, Braden Smith's accomplishments are going to stack up with anybody's.
Yeah.
If he wins another player of the year in this league, that'd be back to back. So that would equal Zach Edey. I don't think Glenn Robinson won two. I think he only won one. I'd have to look back to confirm. I don't know about Rick Mount. Rick Mount might have. But that alone puts him in select company. As you said, he's going to be the all-time Big Ten assist leader, which is really unfortunate because Michigan State fans have gotten to enjoy a quarter century of that with first Mateed Cleaves and then Cassius Winston. But Braden Smith is going to pass those guys. And he's been part of, so far, a team that went to a national title game, a team that went to a Sweet 16, and then, of course, one that was one of the all-time flameouts. So some issues there. But he's also already got two Big Ten titles, and he's aiming for a third. And we don't know yet what the postseason might hold for this team. It's possible they could win the whole deal. They're good enough to. So on every level, this guy has had a career and will have had a career when it's done that is up there at the top, not only of Purdue, but honestly, all time in the Big Ten. And that's weird to say because although I have a lot of respect for him, much more so after last season, honestly. I was more of a Braden Smith skeptic his first 2 years, but last year really won me over. But this is a guy who's going to, when you look at the numbers he's going to amass and the team accomplishments, his career is going to be up there with anybody's who's ever played in this league.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not saying it's going to be the best of the best, but it's going to be up there. He's going to be in that discussion. And I know for me, I think of him as a really good player. I don't quite think of him as that, but when you step back from it, it's there. It's true. Now, we're Michigan State fans. We're biased. Would we swap out Cassius Winston for him? I wouldn't. My gut tells me no. I would take Cassius. And I think you could even make some statistical arguments that would get you into that category. But for us to even be having that conversation tells you something.
Yeah.
And I don't think Purdue fans would trade Braden Smith for Cassius Winston either.
Nope.
So it's pretty remarkable. Now, he's not a perfect player. I think defensively, I think he tries hard, but I think he's limited athletically. And that means you can exploit him at times. He was part of the reason they were number 53 because he's not great defensively. But, again, Cassius Winston wasn't great defensively. He got to the point that he was functional. And that's what I think you could say about Braden Smith. Yeah, can you get him at times? Yes. But he's not a total sieve. He's not just out there being blown by constantly. And he works hard, and he's also capable of occasionally, he's got quick hands. He can force turnovers occasionally. So he's not a zero at that end. It's just, it doesn't compare to what he does offensively. And I'll make one more Michigan State comparison before moving on. I think I've said this before. The guy he reminds me of more than anybody else that I've ever seen in the Big Ten is Scott Skiles. Similar size. The rebounding numbers are similar where you look up like 4.5 rebounds a game for that guy. You can't believe it. And yet he does it. The floor leader, the emotional leadership. Now Scott Skiles was at an all-time level as an emotional guy. Braden Smith's not quite that, but he's pretty good in that category. Shooting ability again, without having great athleticism, being 6'1" to score in a variety of ways. Toughness. I mean, he really does remind me of Scott Skiles, except he got to a higher level of consistency earlier than Skiles did. Skiles struggled with that. He was up and down in terms of mistakes, et cetera,
Hmm.
earlier in his career. Really didn't find consistency until his junior year. And then obviously he had one of the all-time great Big Ten seasons as a senior. I don't think Braden Smith will match like the scoring numbers Skiles had because this team has more talent than Skiles was surrounded by.
Right.
But that's who he reminds me of more than anybody else. And a higher compliment I could not pay to an opposing player than that.
And they're both from Indiana.
That too.
So,
Yes.
so next is another great piece for Purdue. Trey Kaufman Renn, 6'9", 240-pound senior who plays the four, but last year's forced to play the post. And still did great. I mean, he averaged 20 points a game, 6.5 rebounds a game. He shot 60, 43, and 65. Not a ton of three-pointers, but a really great, solid player. And if it weren't for Braden Smith, I think more people probably be talking about him with Purdue.
Absolutely. No, he was tremendous. I mean, it's the Purdue blueprint, you know. You get better, and all of a sudden you look up and you got a star. He was really good last year, and that was after playing second fiddle for a couple seasons to the Zach Edey show. You know, you weren't sure. I mean, I expected Kaufman Renn to be good last year. I didn't expect 20 points a night.
Right.
He was
Right.
he was the best low post player in the league last season, offensively. Bottom line. The 3-point shooting, while you said it's not a high volume thing, the fact is he shoots well enough that you got to guard him out there, which it makes it so much tougher to guard him because he's got that ability to kind of walk his way into the spots he wants. And if you've got to extend out on the floor against him, it means that's even easier for him to get to the spots he wants inside. Great footwork, great strength. He's got a real, as good a knack as anybody I could think of, maybe since Ethan Happ, and finding angles and being able to finish plays that don't look like they should be easy, but he makes them look easy, if you get my meaning. So
Yeah.
he was really good. Not a great rebounder, 6.5 a game. He was okay, led the team, but, you know, Purdue wasn't a great rebounding team last year. And defensively, again, he's another guy. He's not great. He gives you no rim protection. But I think with the roster additions they've made, the
Yeah.
feeling is they're going to be able to take some of that burden off of him. And yet you've still got all the positives offensively there. He's going to be tough to deal with.
One player who's, I think, not changed a whole lot defensively is Fletcher Loyer, 6'5", senior wing. He averaged almost 14 points a game, shot 47, 44, 85. He's a guy you could forget about for a little while, and then he just heat up and just hit like 3, 4 threes before you know it to get his average. Um, he's still primarily a three-point shooter, I guess, but defensively, he's a real question mark. He's the one player I would say he looks exact. I mean, he's hardly changed at all since a freshman. Maybe he's a little more
Well,
consistent, but
yeah, he's gotten much more consistent with the
like
jumper.
physically, he looks identical.
Yeah, you're right. He's never been able to get like much stronger. But you know, I'm going to differ a little bit with you on that. One thing that has changed, if you look at his freshman year, it was pretty much just deep jumpers. He does more than that now. He's not like a guy who's taken 65% of his shots from three. He's still a knockdown 3-point shooter, which is critical to have. And he's gotten more consistent with that too. His freshman year, I think he only shot like 32%, something like that.
Yeah.
He came in with a rep as a shooter, but he had the struggle adjusting as many freshmen do. He did not have problems last year. 44% is knockdown. But he can score other ways. He's gotten better at being able to get to the mid-range, even being able to get to the rim and finish. So he's a little bit more complete offensive player. That said, his primary value is still with the three. There's no doubt about that. Defensively, it's never been great. It's never going to be great. But boy, this guy has played, he and Braden Smith have played so much basketball. If you look at all the games they've played in as a result of NCAA tournament runs, Big Ten championship runs, all the regular season, all as a starter, that it's such a huge leg up
Yeah.
for Purdue to have a guy like that and multiple guys like that.
Yeah, and if we were still in the era of say 6, 7 years ago, with where the charge was called more frequently, he'd be elite defensively. I mean, that
Well, he'd be a
guy
lot better than he is. Yes.
certainly could. He can draw charges even in an era where you don't call charges much. So then we have CJ Cox, 6'3" sophomore guard. He definitely became more utilized throughout the season, averaging 6 points a game and shooting 46, 40, and 78.
Yeah, I thought the shooting was a little bit of a surprise, but that helped because they liked what he did defensively, and that's why he became a starter. That's why his role increased.
Yeah.
And that's really, I look at Cox and the next guy we'll talk about, Jakari Harris, as probably the main reasons why you saw Heidi and Colvin move on.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Um, Cox is not the athletic talent that those two guys were, but you look at the shooting, you look at the defense, you can't argue with it. He looks like a classic kind of Purdue guard that's just going to get better. You know, next year you would assume he'll have a much larger role where he'll be more of a guy they ask to score more. And I'll bet he's probably pretty good when that day comes. But yeah, I expect him to start opposite Loyer.
Well, and you just mentioned Jakari Harris. He's a 6'3" sophomore guard as well, averaging 3.8 points a game in 15 minutes, shot 39, 31, and 95. So clearly not quite as much the shooter as Cox last year.
Yeah, he wasn't last year. He was actually more highly regarded as a recruit, but they see him long term as a good two-way player like Cox. They think he'd be both an offensive contributor. They like his defensive potential. He's maybe a bit more athletic than Cox. 15 minutes a game as a freshman, I would expect about that same kind of role, maybe a little more this year, but an important guy for their depth.
And then we have probably the most important player in some respects, the one that they lost right away in the last season, which was Daniel Jacobson. I think is he the one from Sweden? Is that right?
No, no,
Okay, it must be someone else I'm
from the
thinking of.
U.S. I think he's
So
from
seven foot
Florida.
four, 250 pounder. He got hurt, like I mentioned, the opener last year, which ended his season, and that really changed the trajectory of Purdue and certainly how they play, et cetera, et cetera. But very effective player in the USA under 19 World Championship teams. Uh, he won a gold medal on the U19 team, averaged 6.6 points a game, 4.3 rebounds a game, 1.8 blocks per game. I'm not sure. I assume he'll get 4 years if he wants it.
Yep.
I'm sure he'll get a red shirt for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Although, that's dependent on whether eligibility matters anymore
Right.
4 years from now. But anyway, so he should change the dynamic of the team and obviously playing the five.
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect situation this year because Jacobson was a rapid riser in the last say 9 months or so of his high school career. He started out with because I remember seeing him. I want to say it might have been Cohen Carr's team. I remember seeing a game on television, and I'm pretty sure Jacobson, that the opponent was IMG, and Jacobson was playing for them. And he was huge, tall, not huge. He wasn't filled out. He was a
Yeah, yeah,
stick.
right.
And just not, he didn't do anything. Flash forward a year, and he has a tremendous prep school season and then ends up making Team USA for the under 18 squad and was probably their most impressive player as they won a gold medal. He did the raves that were coming in about Jacobson were incredible. So it wasn't a Zach Edey situation where he was totally off the recruiting radar. Like
Right.
he actually put himself firmly on it. And expectations were very high coming into last season. And then he gets hurt in the first game and he's done. And it definitely changed what Purdue was able to do because he was the one guy who was going to bring interior defense, that wingspan, that size and rim protection. And without him, they had no option for that. So big deal for them, big deal for him, of course, because he had to recover from a season-long injury. Now, he made the under 19 team this summer, and he was solid for another team that won a gold medal, but it wasn't quite, there weren't quite the raves accompanying his play that there were the year before. And in fact, I read some Purdue accounts that said he was not great in the trials to make that team. He did make it, and he ended up contributing, but that he wasn't as good as maybe people had expected him to be. Again, none of that seems uh, hard to believe to me, given that he's coming off such a serious injury. I think it's a perfect situation for him, though, because you can, and for Purdue, because you can look at it and say, well, he probably still lacks a little strength, which is an issue in the Big Ten, but Purdue doesn't have to start him. With the other additions they've made, which we're going to talk about, they can bring him off the bench. They let him work his way into the lineup, determine by virtue of how he plays how much time he gets, and they can let his length play defensively. So he could be that counter move off the bench to give them even more of a defensive presence around the rim. And then offensively, and in other respects relating to his strength, you just see how that develops. I have no doubt that eventually this is a guy who's going to be another really good Purdue center. It's just a matter of how good. We don't
Yeah.
know that, but I think he's going to be good. For this year, I think they just need him to be a piece of the puzzle. An important one, but a piece.
Yeah, I was just looking. I wasn't sure what his injury was, but it was broken tibia, which is
Yep.
lower leg ankle
Well,
area.
right. So, like, I don't think it's necessarily the same issue, but you look at somebody like Aiden Hutchinson, right?
Yeah,
And it took him a long time to come back. Broken legs are no joke. Obviously, it's putting it mildly.
yeah. All right, so then moving on to Raleigh Burgess, 6'11", 245 pounds, sophomore. He had to play last year because of the departure of Jacobson and just needing some size in the post sometimes. He averaged a little under 2 points a game, less than 1 rebound a game, and played about 7 minutes.
Yeah, bottom line is that he's another guy, needs to get stronger, develop his overall game. But I think with what Purdue's got, this could be the developmental year behind the scenes that he probably should have had last year. It probably helps him that he got that experience.
Sure, can't hurt.
Um, but I think he wasn't ready. Obviously, they played him because they had no choice. And this year they should have options. So he may have a year to just kind of develop behind the scenes, and then they'll find out what they've got with him as an upperclassman.
So, like most of the teams we've been talking about with these previews, we have a lot of retained players. And so we'll go Jack Benter, 6'6", redshirt freshman guard, where he could play, with 6'6", you can play quite a few positions, you imagine.
Yeah, and they like his athleticism. They like his toughness. They think he could play anywhere from the 2 to the 4. I just, with this roster, I have a hard time seeing consistent minutes being available for him, but we'll see. If injuries hit or he just proves to be on an accelerated timeline developmentally, we'll see.
And that brings us to newcomers. There aren't a whole lot of them. So we'll begin with Oscar Clough, 6'11", 255 pounds, senior transfer from South Dakota State. Started his career at Washington State. Last year, he averaged 17.6 points a game, 12.3 rebounds a game, to go along with almost a block a game. He shot 63, 67, and 78. And before he become too enamored by the 67% three-point shooting, just recognized, what was he, like 2 for 3 for the year?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
A great addition. Matt Painter, like Tom Izzo, doesn't go into the portal very often, but Painter has proven in the past that when he makes portal additions, they tend to be smart decisions based on what he feels he needs addressed in his roster.
Yeah.
Clough was not an off the radar guy. He was very highly regarded. A lot of people were interested in him, but he made a good choice for himself. Obviously, you go to Purdue as a big man. That's one of the places nationally you'd want to be. And he could be a tremendous tag team partner with Kaufman Renn because he's going to allow Kaufman Renn to not have as much pressure put on him to be the sole reliable big body. Clough can play. He doesn't answer those rim protection issues, but uh, everything else, he's a solid rebounder, very solid. Should help shore that up, which was uncharacteristically mediocre at both ends for Purdue last year. I think Clough will make a difference there. He's obviously a very good finisher around the basket. And it also, as I just mentioned, it takes some pressure off having to throw Jacobson in and say, give us 25 minutes, kid, when he may not be ready for that.
Right.
So a great addition in every respect. Proven producer who really adds some things Purdue needed.
One great tag team partner that you should team up with this year and this fall, as the brothers adjust your gutters. They can take care of your gutters. They can clean out those leaves, get on the ladder so you don't have to. The only ladders we want to see you getting on is to cut down nets in spring. So make sure you contact the Good Brothers today. Take care of whatever gutter might be, whether it's your business, maybe just one section you're having problems with, or it's the whole system. They can do whatever needs to be done. Head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support. There you can find ways to get a hold of Greg or Kurt, depending what side of the state you live on, to have them take a look at your gutters, clean them out, put the leaf guard on, whatever, replace, repair. You get 10% off. You mentioned Final Four when you get your estimate. So do it today. You'd be glad you did, and do something fun with your time and stay out of the emergency room. Don't fall off those ladders. All right. So another newcomer for the team is Liam Murphy, 6'7" grad transfer from North Florida. He began his career in the Ivy Leagues at Columbia, and he averaged 13 points a game, 3.3 rebounds a game, and shot 44, 42, and 76.
Yeah. And again, this seems like a very savvy portal move by Painter. So right now you've got Jakari Harris likely as a guard off the bench, but
Right.
Murphy gives you another option, one with size at 6'7", who if that shooting translates from North Florida, 42% from three last year, that's a big addition for this team because now you've got somebody who you could bring in, say, when Loyer needs a rest, and you're not really losing much in terms of the perimeter shooting.
Right.
So a very targeted, smart addition to fill a hole on this roster.
And then we have, and I almost said it, Omer Meyer. I almost said Oscar Meyer. He's 6'4", 18-year-old freshman from Israel. He's one I think they're really excited about. He played for Israel for the U19 team in World Basketball Championships and the U20 team in Eurobasket. So for those teams, and then in the 19 teams, he played 20, scoring 20 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, 4.3 assists per game. And when he played for the U20 team, he was averaging 16.7 points a game, 5.1 assists per game. So clearly he's got talent. He's got, maybe he's the next Braden Smith for Purdue.
They're excited about him, and I understand why. When you see that kind of production at two levels for your national team, that says something.
Yeah.
The word on him is he's a guy that is given to the spectacular play at the point. So he's kind of a home run hitter. He could also shoot well. He's got good positional size at 6'4". The athleticism is reportedly not high level, so you wonder about the defensive end, but I think he's going to play an important role. The nice thing is, well, let's start with this. You mentioned at the outset, part of Purdue's fade, that mid-February period where they were getting blown out, because they lost 4 straight. 3 of them were by 9 points or more.
Right.
So that was a stage of the season where you thought, wow, they're going right in the tank. And then they pulled through it, had the good postseason run, and all was sort of forgiven. But I think one of the main reasons that happened is the toll that all of those minutes, and not just minutes, but high usage minutes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that was on Braden Smith all year long. He couldn't, he might have played the same number of minutes as he did the year before. I haven't looked at it, but it was probably pretty similar. But there's a big difference between a lot of those minutes focusing first and foremost on throwing the ball in the post to Zach Edey and you being the guy, you and Trey Kaufman,
Right.
but obviously they were relying on him for so much more than they did the 2 years prior. And I think it did take a toll on him. Now he pulled through it, to his credit. But that can happen when you're using a guy that much. There might well be points for a couple weeks where he's just not the same player. That should not be an issue now with Meyer. I think they're going to be able to rest Smith more. I still think he'll play 30 plus, obviously,
Right.
but
Yeah.
they can rest him more. And what they might be able to do, it could be twofold. I could see Meyer, if he does shoot well, getting some off ball minutes, but I can also see scenarios where they might put him on the ball
Right. And
and keep
Smith.
Braden Smith out there as a shooting
Yep.
guard
Right.
where he's still playing, but the wear and tear, the demands are a little bit reduced, you know? A
Yep.
lot of options for Matt Painter to work with. Um, he's a great insurance policy. And I think maybe more importantly than that, he's a nice foil to play off and with Smith to take some of the load off. So again, a very targeted, very smart addition, assuming that he plays anywhere close to expectations.
And the final addition is the only freshman from the United States, anyways, Antoine West, 6'3", guard from Toledo. So I don't think they have anybody coming from Indiana, which is a little bit unusual for Purdue, but there you have it.
Yep. They think he's got the potential to be a multi-skilled, versatile contributor, but again, with all the guards we're talking about, it's hard to see much of a role for West this year. I think he's
Yeah.
more a guy for the future.
All right, so that brings us to overall analysis for Purdue. I mean, you have them number one. They are consensus. I think they're consensus number one for the Big Ten.
Oh,
All the
absolutely.
pundits, top five preseason, and as you mentioned, top two. If you're going to probably put Purdue for Final Four versus, or at least national championship versus the field in the Big Ten. I mean, I think you take Purdue probably over anyone else. So anyway, you'd obviously have up there, and along with everyone else, there's every reason to think that since they have so many parts returning that have proven production and production together, there's reason to think that this team is going to be very, very good this year.
Well, obviously, any discussion starts with those three guys, and that's an
Yeah.
edge over everybody else in the Big Ten and pretty much everybody else nationally. You're not going to find teams that have three more proven players who have produced at a high level than the three Purdue has. It's just so funny how time flies. I mean, it seems like it was literally yesterday we were talking
Right.
about those guards being an issue because they were freshmen,
Right.
and here they
No,
are
I don't.
as the graybeards, right?
Yeah.
But Purdue has that as the starting point. Then you look at what they've added to try and address some of the issues last year. So the primary issues, again, were defense in general, specifically interior defense and rebounding. Well, you add a guy in Clough who is a proven high level mid major contributor. And the expectation is he won't produce the same kind of numbers he did
Right.
at South Dakota State, but they expect him to be a really good, solid contributor at the five and to help shore up that rebounding, give them another weapon in the post. Those are things they can use. Also, can take some of the heat off TKR in terms of minutes. And then Jacobson being back healthy, hopefully, is able to help them address that interior defense issue with rim protection.
Yeah.
7'4", huge wingspan. Whatever the issues might be strength wise and just, adjusting to playing at this level for the first time, that length should play.
Yep.
So they've addressed that. I think some of what needs to change, though, is internal. So guys like Smith and Loyer and TKR, they got to get better defensively. It's for all the hype around Purdue, and I'm right there with people. I'm picking them to win the league. I think they're as legitimate a contender for the national title as anybody else out there. But that's not to say that they're flawless. They have areas that were real issues last year that got to get better. And if that doesn't happen, we're probably talking about them coming up short of these expectations.
Yeah.
So I think the addition of Meyer too in the backcourt really important because that should add a lot just in taking heat off Smith. Um, and then the addition of Murphy seems really smart to me too, because you can never have enough shooting, and you add another shooter, you know, We don't know with Meyer. He's reportedly a decent shooter, but we don't know how well that'll translate. Harris was not a great shooter last year. Maybe he'll get better, but we don't know. So it's nice to have a guy that you feel pretty confident in that reserve perimeter group as an option. Um, Overall, this team has everything you could ask for, though. Really, it's deep, it's experienced, yet they've added new players that seem to have some real potential. I have little doubt they're going to be one of, if not the best offensive teams in the country. It would be shocking if they're not,
Yeah.
with everything they've got. Whether they can win championships, though, it's going to come down to defense and rebounding. I think it's that simple. If they're better enough in those two areas, and I don't think they have to be elite, I just think they have to be better. With that offense, they could beat anybody.
Well, and I think, everyone talks about the importance of the portal, and you see these teams that become older. You look at the Final Four this last year, and a lot of old teams. But the difference that Purdue has is they are old and they've gone old together, which is probably even more important than just
100%.
getting old, right? And so that's
100%.
the huge advantage that they have over a lot of other teams.
Yeah. And, and you can make the argument that, hey, by March, it doesn't matter as much because
Yeah.
even if you've got a team filled with a lot of new faces, by then they've played 4 months together. Okay. I think to some extent that's true. I don't think it's a hard either or. But if you're giving me, I would think this would be true of any coach. If you're giving me a choice, give me a core of guys who have played together for 4 years, or give me guys who were together in their first year. You're going to take the former.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have
All
to.
things equal, for sure. Yeah. You'd be
Yeah.
crazy not
And
to.
that's what Purdue has. So yeah, look, Matt Painter's really got it going. I mean, there's no two ways about it. This will be, if they're as good as advertised, this will be the fourth out of the last 5 years in which they were a team capable of doing anything. I mean,
Yeah.
winning as much as there is to win. And the one year where they weren't was last year, where people did expect them to do those things in the preseason. They just didn't quite deliver on it, but yet, got to the Sweet 16. It wasn't bad for a down year.
Yeah.
So it's, again, Michigan State fans know what this is like. We've seen periods and runs like this in Tom Izzo's program. And it's a great feeling as a fan to feel like every year you've got a combination of players that you shouldn't put any limitations on. And
Yeah.
that's where Purdue is this year. I mean, I think for me, they were clearly the top choice. As I said, I didn't even consider anybody else. Whether they could live up to that remains to be seen. But generally speaking, in the regular season, when Matt Painter is expected to have a good team, they're pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, last year, you can handicap them by saying, well, they lost. They have a force to play differently since they lost one of the key components in the inside. I mean, we
Yeah, you
don't
don't
know
know
obviously
what
what they would have
difference,
been. You can
right?
never
What
know.
difference Jacobson would have made if he'd been healthy. I
Right.
I suspect the way things played out, I don't think it would have been enough. I think Michigan State was clearly better than
Probably so.
everybody else, but it would have been interesting.
Yep. For
And
sure.
and now they got Jacobson back, so we get to see what happens just a year removed.
Yeah, and it is interesting too. You see, just like we have these runs with Michigan State, you'll see this team that's dominant for a couple years in a row. It seems to focus around a solid point guard, like as you mentioned, the force multiplier, and that's definitely the case with Purdue in these last 4 years, really.
Absolutely, Matt Painter over the court. When you think about Purdue, you think of big men first, right?
Yeah.
But he hasn't had a guy like Braden Smith. He's had some
No.
very good guards. He hasn't, they kind of have been more akin to somebody like Wisconsin in that they haven't typically had that one guy who is the dominant floor leader, that they function more in a team fashion, and you don't have that one guy, that focal point. But Braden Smith has been that, and he has just been outstanding in that area. There's no two ways about it. And again, I say that as somebody that was skeptical of him early on, but there's nothing more you can say.
No. Well, but who wasn't skeptical, honestly, because I think probably most Purdue fans were because he was not a
Well,
heralded recruit. He was just a
I
guy they just got out of high school.
I stayed skeptical longer than
Well,
they did.
yes.
And I really felt like that freshman year, that flame out in the tournament, the loss to the
Yeah.
16 seed, I put a lot of that on their guards. And I think fairly. I
Yeah.
think they were part of the problem. There were turnover problems. And then in sophomore year, they didn't have those problems. And they go all the way to the national championship game. But then last year, I wondered, okay, you played with Zach Edey for 2 years. Now let's see it when you're the focal point. Well, he's done
He
that now
delivered.
too. There's
Yeah.
nowhere else to go.
Yeah. Right.
I was not a willing participant and member of the Braden Smith fan club, but I'm in there now because he's left me no choice.
Been dragged along. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be going on to our Michigan State preview next. So hang in for that. That's a little big deep dive that, of course, Michigan State Rod has as the number 2 team in the Big Ten. So we'll see you then. And so until next time, the Final Four is not on the schedule. Go green.